the Ateneo Institute by the Biodiversity Teaching in the Philippine-Cambodian-German Network, or BioPhil, and the Ateneo Biodiversity Research Laboratory. So I was going through the different events of the day, and I think that this is something that's close to the heart of every teacher and every student, this conversations. And as you can see with the setup, we are a hybrid format in which the on-site component is part of the third Philippine Symposium on Freshwater Biodiversity and Ecosystems this 2022. The conference is happening right now in the Ateneo de Manila University. And apart from our PSBFE participants, we are joined by our online participants being able to interact via Zoom. Actually, we have 400 plus registered online participants. So even if only half come in, that's a lot of people, and we hope to have a really good sharing today. Please remember that this is not structured to be a talk coming from the people who are designated as our speakers. It's a conversation. So we hope that the audience participates by giving their own sharing or asking questions that our distinguished speakers can answer. So to officially begin the session, we will play the opening remarks of Dr. Maria Asunta Cuyegkeng, the Executive Director of ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture, or the AUN-EEC. The goal of the AUN-EEC is to develop a generation of Southeast Asians who have the mindset and competencies to care for the environment. She served as the director of the Ateneo Institute of Sustainability and is now a professor at the Department of Educational Leadership and Management and the executive director of the Lili Gokongwei Mutual Leadership Academy at the Ateneo de Manila University.
My pleasure. Today I
reminder, this is not meant to be a webinar or a plenary, just a simple plenary discussion. We encourage everybody to participate by sharing and asking questions, because this roundtable discussion basically aims to serve as a platform to openly discuss strategies and approaches in promoting biodiversity and ecological education in the classroom and beyond. I'm going to introduce the format of what we're going to be doing today. So the first part is going to be the sharing component. We're going to have three distinguished individuals who have spent many years doing biodiversity-related work and teaching, and they're united by this idea that we need to push for biodiversity education. So in order to start the session, we're going to have each of the sharers share first their experiences, and they're going to be having their own presentations. If you have any questions, please reserve it until all of the presenters have been able to present their individual presentations. Now, the question that we will answer in this conversation as a whole is, what are the challenges and best practices in teaching biodiversity to the youth and university students? So you might want to think about your own experience with regards to that particular question and use the presentations of our panel members, something to contextualize that experience so that we can have a fruitful discussion later. So to get the conversations going, let us proceed with our first sharer. Our first speaker is a professor at the Department of Biology of Ateneo and the principal investigator of the Ateneo Biodiversity Research Laboratory. He is also the Philippine Country Coordinator of the Biodiversity Teaching in the Philippine-Cambodian-German Network, or BioPhil, which is co-presenting this particular session. To those who were with us on the on-site conference yesterday, you would remember him being awarded the Freshwater Taxonomist Special Achievement Award by the Philippine Society of Freshwater Sciences for his decades of work on aquatic insects and decapods. Please welcome, with a warm round of applause, both physical and virtual, Dr. Hendrik Freitag.
Thanks for your very warm words of welcome, Dr. Tomish. It's a pleasure to present here some quite individual and subjective ideas of teaching biodiversity or biodiversity teaching based on our experiences here in the Ateneo de Manila University and our biodiversity laboratory. One of the major goals of our university is service learning. And we try also to implement this in our activities that we do with students in the field. So we combine collection of field data with outreach activities with communities that directly depend on the ecosystem services. What is quite different from what people that live in cities are used to. So these students, who are same time researchers in these places, give community briefings, they teach in the grade school over there, all related to biodiversity information and stories, even in playful ways. We acquired especially students who are organized in the BOX organization, the Student Biological Organization of our institution. Yeah, and then we also perform practical conservation efforts together with the communities and the students in these areas. For instance, here it's not just tree planting, it's rainforestation farming, a concept that includes the native hardwoods and are therefore much more biodiversity supportive. But it's much more difficult than just planting trees. To rear them is not so easy, but it's also a very important and nice thing to learn for students, that it's not so easy to just say plant trees. So all of this, again, together with the local communities there and our students. And at the same time, they're using some days of these excursions for their actual data collection for a project, for instance, CSIS project or another project. So furthermore, we also bring entire classes, especially also from undergraduate level, to the field, for instance, in the systematic courses or in the ecology courses. And we notice it is very important for them to experience biodiversity firsthand themselves, as especially city kids are not really aware what biodiversity means outside. It's more than seeing some tigers in National Geographic Channel or something. Yeah. So real appreciation of nature and biodiversity develops through direct contact, in our opinion. So let's go a bit into one branch of biodiversity, the species level diversity. You might have seen this graph before. This is like the full number of described species on Earth. It's a little bit outdated, but the proportions are somewhat correct. What you notice here is the very large majority actually are just one phylum, Arthropoda, and especially the insects. While on the other hand, what people usually deal with, oops, I was too fast, I'm sorry. What experts usually deal with are vertebrates. If you go to a conference on conservation or biodiversity or biology in general, you will always have predominating part of scientists who share on vertebrate research. This is not bad, I like that, but we should not neglect the other things which actually make the large majority compared to this very small fraction of species level biodiversity what are vertebrates. So stronger focus on neglected taxa, then because biodiversity is more than just some marvelous or enigmatic keystone species. There's a paper actually pointing out what are the inhibiting things to do a better conservation and also research for invertebrates. I will make it short. This paper of Cardoso finds out several reasons. First, the public is usually not very well aware of these small things that live in a hidden way. So automatically also politics doesn't care about them so much as for other enigmatic species. So automatically also the funding opportunities are usually more limited in opposite to those very well-known taxa. Then we have the fact that only a minor proportion of the invertebrates is named already. The majority is still undescribed, unknown. And even for those that are known already, we usually have large gaps in knowledge of their ecological requirements, distribution patterns, seasonal patterns of their communities, and so on. So the overall published knowledge on invertebrates in most tropical countries is very limited. And furthermore, the existing knowledge is often hardly accessible because they might be very old or non-open access publications. I will add some more points that are not taken up from Cardoso. It's also important that the primary literature is used, but these are often non-open access and therefore rarely cited. This is a problem then in the return for scientists who deal with that, so they get less cited. On the other hand, I commonly observe, also in my function as an editor for journals, questionable literature of so-called predatory journals, what usually pop up first when you Google something, are much more cited than the actual original literature that covers proper information on certain taxa. When it comes to projects in the education, preparing to be a professional, let's say, taxonomist, systematist, or ecologist, this needs long time to be trained to deal with these organisms. Usually, this is not paid for because this is, labor, workforce. Usually you get it just funded for a short period. But often it's easier to get a machine funded, expensive equipment, while for our field of biodiversity research, in my opinion, we need, first of all, skilled people. Then, I've mentioned it already a bit, this enigmatic taxon problem. It causes also that taxonomists, for instance, who work on very rare organisms, they are actually in highest need because there are very few old people who still maintain the knowledge, and there's almost no young ones that follow them. On the other hand, for groups that are very nice, enigmatic, marvelous. You have a lot of taxonomists all doing the same. Automatically, those are much more cited because there are many colleagues citing them. So based on some ways how scientific output is measured, you actually automatically see the most needed one is the worst based on scientific output. But it's not true. It's just there is no one anymore who is interested in these taxon and would cite. And I have real example in mind. I know an old lady working with these nematodes. They have economic importance. She got a lot of money from the industry to identify stuff, but she's not cited because yeah, there are no more other experts for that group. While butterflies are very beautiful, of course, we have many experts. Nothing against butterfly research, don't get me wrong. So common mistakes that I have observed during my career with students, but also with colleagues. And this is also sometimes important for educators to know what is possible and what is not possible. As I commonly observed, some educators want too much, what is actually not doable, especially when it comes to invertebrates that are so massive and have so large diversity. The dimension of this large diversity is commonly underestimated, as yeah, the public awareness lacks. So a student can definitely not reliably assess all invertebrate diversity in an area. It's impossible. But I've seen many projects where teachers want that. Forget about it, limit it to something doable. On the other hand, also, like a result of such overwhelming task, identify everything, like here you might come up with 20, 40 different taxa, but when they are identified on higher level, this does not indicate yet high biodiversity. Remember, more than 50% of all organisms are invertebrates. So 20 is nothing, it's a low number. It's actually low diversity. In vertebrates, it might be something else. 20 frog species in one place, that's good. So the identification of those is quite difficult. I mentioned before, you need to assess the original literature in many cases. So what looks much easier is Google. Do you find something, images that look similar? Maybe you can identify it by Google Images. Nowadays, a lot of stuff is uploaded. Or, yeah, you find nice books. For instance, The Water Beetles of Florida is really a very nice book, but then cannot be used here in tropical Asia. It will simply not work. Yeah, and the result of such things when you are not aware of these problems is our colleague Dr. Garces noticed that recently and published also about it. For a long time, this family, Ephemeralidae, was reported from the Philippines. In fact, it does not occur here. This family does not occur in this realm at all. It's Nearctic. Just by either way, either using American literature, or in fact, you could end up using this for our taxa from Southeast Asia, you could potentially end up in this one, but then, yeah, the wrong literature was used. They look a bit similar, but then, yeah, different families. In fact, and it's published now, they are all Pterogonidae, another family that is really present here. So then there's a problem with all these terms, and these terms vary from one group to one group, even within the invertebrates. For instance, rostrum in crustaceans is something of the carapace. A rostrum in true bugs is the mouth part. Yeah, all of these terms must be learned, and that's why I limit it to some small groups, but then go in detail and make it precise. Instead of guessing what this term could mean, I have heard that something before from another taxon, no, that might go wrong. Taking small organisms less serious is also a problem. Why should we not take it more serious? Because for us it looks small and not important. It might have very important functions. Okay, virus is not an organism, but then we know what a virus can cause and how small it is. Blasting is commonly misunderstood as a tool. If you have a barcode, you blast it, you get a result, what your species is. Forget about this when it comes to invertebrates. The very, very large majority has never been barcoded. There are no references. And it's also tricky to conclude from a match, what may be 20% different. You conclude, oh, this might be this family. No, barcoding is not made for that. Only like close to 100% matches might indicate same species. Yeah, urge to come up with a species level name. some teachers want that. It is very difficult. I agree, it would be best to come up with species level names for your data set, but in many cases not doable for a student. But then you could switch to morphospecies. You study them in detail, you see they're different. You cannot tell what's their name, but you treat this one as species A and this as species B, and later on they can still be identified and the data set is really useful. So some examples, what we know, that was a lot of theory. Now to some examples from teaching in Ateneo when it comes to biodiversity. Yeah, very supportive to us and our students, especially on the graduate level, was this biodiversity teaching in a Philippine-Cambodian-German network, BioPhil project. So it focuses on training modules in the universities here in the Philippines and in Cambodia, with specialists that are invited from other partner universities to be conducted then with graduate students plus junior faculty members. Then it also includes a mobility program that young faculty members or CESA students can go to partner institutions and being trained by experts for a certain taxon or for a certain methodology there. Yeah, and this research, this finally also leads to a research collaboration almost automatically, and you can make use of these synergies of teaching and research and synergies between different institutions. So this is an example. I borrowed slides of Dr. Delocado, how we advertise for CESA students, what they can do. So we tell them you need a lot of patience dealing with microscopic specimens in our case, as we are focusing on invertebrates, right? And spend many hours with microscopes or molecular genetic works. But you also need capability of going out to the field, collecting data there. But all of this can be learned, and usually our CESA students learn that quite well, up to perfection for some that are teachers now themselves. We also try to do not extend that cost to the students. We try to cover this in all existing projects. But anyway, it is not so expensive. Yeah, then publish outputs, also important for us. Here are some examples. These are all student works. And we also encourage those that are active CESA students to present already for the next level under them to get an idea about CESA, how it works from a student perspective. Yeah, one of the interesting results, this was a training. That's our campus. If you would go a bit higher, you would have this view. There are some small creeks down there, and it was just meant as a training how to use the nets, what are the microhabitats to look for something. And by chance, they found that one, and it turned out to be new. And of course, then, even it's actually very small, it is not very interesting looking for most people. But yeah, it went viral because of the strange story behind, found in a mega city just during a little trial of sampling methods. Yeah, the students then actually did their real thesis in Mindoro and found 3 new species of the same genus. And this was also published, undergraduate level. This was an ecological community analysis. I always love to point out why species level might matter. Also, commonly, family level is only possible, but it might matter. This is a set of ecological scores by ordination, and it's only one family. So here is one representative of genus Anseronix. This is its ecological niche, quite far up there. Everything what is distant from that means it has a very different ecological niche. Something like this species, but it's the same genus again. And then there's some more. So if you would generalize now on genus level, the score is in the middle and it has almost no more value. You would enlarge the theoretical niche of this genus so much. Therefore, yeah, species level might matter for some questions. Another example, a graduate class project, checklist of all the aquatic bugs of Mindoro. But then we also used our network to include an expert who at least verifies all the results. It was done by the students, but we have an expert for this group who validates if their identification was correct. Yeah, sorry for taking a little bit longer. Yeah, an emotional topic for me. Yeah, my summary and conclusions, you can read here yourself. I mentioned all of these points already in my talk, and I don't want to make it even longer.
Thank you very much, Dr. H, for the very passionate discussion. It's something close to home. And being a junior faculty member of Ateneo, I've seen really the efforts of the Biodiversity Laboratory over the years, and they've really come out with a lot of student performed output. So thank you again, Dr. Feitak. Our second sharer, so that we can steamroll ahead, is a staple attendee of the previous BSFBE conferences and has had very valuable contributions to understanding the freshwater ecosystems of tropical Asia, especially Singapore. He is the head of the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum and an associate professor of the Department of Biological Sciences of the National University of Singapore. His research areas include freshwater biodiversity and ecology, especially decapod crustaceans, as well as aquatic invasions. He is the principal investigator of the Freshwater and Invasion Laboratory. Everyone, may I present to you Dr. Darren Yeo. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Hello. Hi. So I'm Darren. Okay, let's see where we can go with this. So this is a brief sharing. I was asked to talk, really share about my own experiences in teaching undergraduate classes under the Department of Biological Sciences. Is where I do a lot of teaching, but also share experiences, or at least share what the museum that I'm now helping to manage, what they do in terms of education outreach. Right. So let's get started. Oh, and of course, first before I forget, because I'll forget, thanks to organizers for inviting me to share with all of you. All right, so the first part I want to talk about is this student engagement, the classroom and beyond. There's a lot of things we can talk about. I just want to focus on this thing called active learning. What is active learning? So, learning students engage to tell you everything, then you listen and all that, right? But then active learning is basically, I'll say a few things, then you go scratch your head trying to figure out what I'm saying, right? That's active learning, right? So students actively engage in their own learning process, but it's a lot more than that. It's a few other things. So then what's my role? Just to confuse? Not just to confuse. My role is educator's role is to train, to organize, to moderate, facilitate that learning process that students are doing, and then to take credit for it. Okay. So do we naturally apply active learning? Right. Active learning, it sounds like I think it's a pedagogical term, right? And when I first heard the term active learning, I said, okay, this is another pedagogical term I need to learn or I have to apply in my teaching. And I wasn't really specifically looking to blend this into my teaching. Okay, but later I found out that, oh, active learning is actually already being employed in several things that I do in my teaching. These are just some examples, clarification pauses, like for example, you stop and think, oh, what am I saying? So clarification pauses, real life examples, there's a whole list here. Again, I'll come back to this. So actually, I realized that I was already applying this active learning. Also, I just learned something new. Just that I didn't know it was called active learning. So actually, I was using active learning to achieve learning outcomes and address challenges that are related to learning about biodiversity and ecology. Right? What are the challenges? Some of the challenges are things like this. To some audiences, it's dry, it's boring, it's theoretical, right? Especially the students who have to take compulsory courses when they really would be rather doing something else. They have lack of interest. Some topics are just very hard to relate, right? So if I talk to you about crabs, but you're interested in birds, well, why do I care about crabs, right? Then you see the bird eat a crab and you're all bird, right? So unrelatable topics, familiarity with lower level cognitive levels. So with cognitive skills, so people are more. It depends on the audience, right? You might get people just tell me what I need to know, and I will memorize it and I'll give it back in the exam, right? But sometimes we want them to develop more skills in them, and some fixed mindsets, right? So we do active learning to overcome these challenges and to achieve these outcomes. Knowledge gain, We want them to have appreciation of the subjects beyond the classroom, a positive study attitude, come out, have fun, enjoy, and develop higher level cognitive skills. So basically, I don't just know the things and then walk out of the classroom. I know the things, I know how to apply these things. And if I have a different problem, perhaps I can use some of these basic principles to answer these questions and to critically create and creatively think and question. So there's a lot here, and I don't want to waste too much time, but these are some of the active learning methods that I have used. Things like clarification, pauses, real life examples and case studies. Actually, I don't have to go into detail because Henrik just used a lot of these. He uses a lot of these things. So when I say any of these things, examples, see Henrik, please. Okay. So real life examples, case studies. So instead of just talking about, oh, this species is found here, this species is found there, go out and look for the species itself, right? Go to campus, go to the creek, which people may visit but may not call you to go with you to them, but then you try to find it. Or have group discussions and discuss about it, argue about it. Sometimes I do things like have games in class, right? Just make it a bit more interesting. But of course, games have to be relevant to the topic. 1-minute questions. Team teaching is also fun. Sometimes people get tired of seeing the same face, right? Same face, and so I team up with some of my co-lecturers, and we'll sort of tag team and teach. In fact, it's even more fun when we disagree. Because students like to see drama. Like to see some fighting. So there are various other things, project work. So all these are actually no-brainers, right? A lot of us do it. A lot of you are teachers. A lot of you teach your students. A lot of you are senior students who teach your juniors, right? You're teaching in the form of, your junior come up to you, or even your classmate, hey, how I don't quite get it, then you explain, right? So these are all things that we do use. And these are various ways in which they address some of those challenges. So I don't waste too much time. Okay, so before I move on to the next part, my thoughts on active learning, most of us probably incorporate it into our modules or in the way we teach in general. But the important thing is active learning or any other fancy pedagogical term, these are not magic bullets, right? At the end of the day, you still have to, there's no substitute for being clear, being clear, and being passionate, being able to convey the information, being able to explain clearly. Okay, so the other part is this. I just want to share you very quickly what the museum that I'm attached to, Ecom Chen Natural History Museum in NUS, National University of Singapore. We also have, besides being a research center, so biodiversity research and the collections is a very important part of our museum, but we also have an important outreach and education unit. And through there, we do indoor, outdoor, and virtual biodiversity programs. Okay, so we do biodiversity education for not just students, right, undergrads, but also students from from primary school, secondary school. We also do education for the teachers. What we do, we're lucky, we have a museum, we have a gallery. We leverage on our museum gallery. Of course, you can go out to the field, but the gallery is also quite a very useful tool, right? So we leverage on the museum gallery to have specimen-based learning. So our learning and our teaching is all based on the specimens that you see there and the stories we tell based on the specimens that are there. I mean, you may or may not be able to touch them, but at least they are there for people to see, right? When it comes to school kids, we try to cater our courses, our workshops to sort of match the syllabus that they have. So at least it enhances the student or supplements their school learning as well, right? We also have outdoor biodiversity programs. See Henrik. But basically, like this, I would bring kids, students, our own students out, and in cases where they're actually collecting data. So it's great if you can go into the streams and collect directly jump into the streams, collect specimens, and bring them back and study them and all that. Not always possible because, of course, some places will permit issues and all that, or you want to do it so that after that the rest of the public will start doing the same thing, things like that. So we try to do some non-invasive techniques, for example, just collecting data through photography and things like that. Okay, or just visual sensors. And again, games are always trying to do games. So biodiversity themed games as learning tools to teach students and educators how to teach themselves and others how to incorporate biodiversity into their programs. Sharing biodiversity knowledge and guiding tips. And this thing that was really moved forward a lot because of the pandemic, right? Virtual biodiversity education program, right? We moved from traditional brick and mortar type of teaching, face to face, to blended learning, where you start to have more and more online and more um, uh, uh, tech tech solutions. Okay, it's really driven by COVID restrictions initially, but now that COVID has ended, not ended, okay, slowing down, whatever, yeah, not so bad. Um, we're still continuing with our online education programs. Okay, so things like virtual field trips, virtual talks. Then we also still engage the public in general, not just schools and kids and students, but we have documenting nature workshops for public, we have preservation questions and conservation workshops also. So that's in a nutshell, there's a lot more, but I think I'll just stop there. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Darren. I think something that's been echoed in the two presentations is actually bringing people who handles numerous lab courses with environmental biology majors and organizes service learning activities during field classes. He is one of the page managers of UST AGOS, or Aquatic Guild of Scientists. Currently, he serves as the coordinator for the Science, Technology, and Society Environmental Science Cluster at the University of Santo Tomas. Please welcome with warm applause Mr. Alfredson Peralta.
Thank you, Dr. Miney, and hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, as you have seen, I'd like to echo what Dr. Freitag and Dr. Yo have mentioned earlier, and I'm happy that we didn't talk about the contents of our presentation, and somehow we are actually sharing the same sentiments and what we hope to share with everyone when it comes to teaching biodiversity. And my sharing for today would be is titled similar to how we call ourselves in UST. We're known to be UST growling tigers, but this time I'm using a little bit of Filipino term tigres, but tigres toward biodiversity management, which stands for teaching and interventions geared by research and extension services toward biodiversity management. So in order for us in UST to be able to share biodiversity and to empower students in the community to really look into these organisms, we hope to capitalize on three portions or three parts of this tigres that I hope to share with you. First is teaching, and then followed by research and extension services. They are all interconnected, definitely. If you notice with the previous presentations, we share the same contents. So for teaching, I'll be highlighting how we offer regular courses from Department of Biological Sciences and some general education courses, such as Science, Technology, and Society, as well as Environmental Science for other as electives for other programs. And then I'll be sharing as well how research in the university has allowed students to further learn how biodiversity or what's the biodiversity in the Philippines and even in other places around the world. And I'll focus on some undergraduate and graduate students who have experience doing research on biodiversity. And of course, I want to end later on my sharing on how we further use this background in teaching and research to further reach the community and through extension services. So I'll cite very recent activities that we had right after, or it's not right after we're allowed to do off-campus activity, on-site activities in UST. I want to start with sharing with you who are the students that we are handling, or at least how many students we are handling for the entire university who should be able to access information about biodiversity. So we're around 5,700 students to handle. Specifically, I categorize this according to the programs who will, of course, receive for environmental biology, the other would be for industrial biology. Nonetheless, all these biology students would of course be taking fundamental courses about basic biology, basic and fundamental courses on biology like zoology, botany, of course, ecology, and then a number of courses, of course, that I'm pretty sure everyone here, I think some of you have taken some of these courses. And I want to highlight also that among these courses, regardless of their major, they'll be able to appreciate later on what's the impact or the implication of being able to look after biodiversity and how it will be able to um, get hold of or at least be able to promote later on One Health. That's something that I want to share as well as part of our highlights in UST. And then the other groups definitely with the other natural sciences program like chemistry, physics, etc. from the College of Science taking aside from these technical courses, of course, they have their STS as well, so the Science, Technology, and Society. And then other non-science programs of the university, of course, those are other academic units taking Gen Ed courses. And at the same time, some of them will be taking environmental science as electives. And you'll see the proportions here. Much of students taking biodiversity, or at least STS, with highlights on biodiversity of biodiversity. So in terms of modality, this is one of the challenges that we have faced for the past few years since 2019, before the pandemic. And of course, a number of strategies, pedagogical techniques to bring this information to students would vary according to um, lockdown scenarios or surges of COVID-19. So it would vary as you have noticed. And then hopefully now that we are experiencing a little bit better condition, we're able to maintain at least on-site classes, limited face-to-face classes, so that like what Dr. Freitag and Dr. Yo have mentioned, this topic would be very close to students, more than them at least knowing them online, seeing different flora and fauna online. So being able to have hands-on experience with these organisms would really play a big role in establishing impacts to the students and to the community later on. So just a brief comparison how we try to still allow the students learn biodiversity and explore different ecosystems, even there at home, or at least with the restrictions of COVID-19. Within their areas, they'll be able to go around and appreciate what they have, at least in terms of flora and fauna. And then even with their own computers, we tried to ask them to map out distributions of different organisms, like using different programs, basic GIS techniques. And then eventually we're able to have the ability to hold limited face-to-face classes. Some of them are actually here who has recently graduated. If you notice from online classes, and then we were allowed to at least access the campus for a limited time, limited day, and we had to maximize that to allow the students experience hands-on laboratory and fieldwork activities. So even in the inside the campus, we hope that they'll be able to go around, do virtual tree walk activity, be able to utilize wetlands that we have, at least through ponds and fountains, look at aquatic and terrestrial organisms and be able to document them, identify them to the lowest possible taxa that they can, and apply the previous courses that they have taken. So I'm now moving towards the general ed courses, aside from, of course, BS students who are expected to have a clear or closer connection to biodiversity. Our target is, of course, to make this closer to non-science major students. And for science, technology, and society, we deeply anchor our course plan syllabus according to the three themes. First, as a royal Pontifical Catholic University, we of course remain true to the Laudato Si, the papal encyclical on the care on our common home. And of course, SDGs, 17 UN SDGs, which are all interconnected, definitely. And we will realize, based on the welcome remarks and the contents that we have been sharing with you, this 17 SDGs are, of course, deeply dependent and connected to biodiversity. And hence, on the latter part of the course of STS, we focus on one theme, and that is the WHO approach on One Health. I think I mentioned this earlier, that we have to allow the students realize how important biodiversity and ecosystems are in establishing One Health for everyone. So, covering environment and animal health, I'm pretty sure students should be able to appreciate why we teach biodiversity, why we have to know them, and be able to protect them. Okay? And in speaking of protection, I hope to further go on another part of our efforts in teaching biodiversity, and of course, that's through research. I want to start with the mentors of those students, for those undergraduate and graduate students. There are a number of mentors, of course, pushing for prioritizing biodiversity. So in the university, in our RCNAS, or Research Center for the Natural and Applied Sciences, this is a group called BEST. BEST stands for Biodiversity, Ecology, Systematics, and Taxonomy Group, who are of course focused or with expertise according to biodiversity, EST, or ecology, systematics, and taxonomy. So I will not go to each expertise, of course, but know that this in research, it is very important to identify experts and mentors so that the students, graduate or undergraduate, would be able to be guided properly for this type of research. This is our recent trip. I think 2 weeks ago, one of them is here. We were joined by undergraduate and graduate students in Kaseknan Protected Landscape, because we also want to highlight in their research how important it is for us to know the benefits of having protected areas in the country, and specifically for a particular ecosystem. I'm pretty sure everyone here is familiar with different protected areas, terrestrial reserves, marine protected areas. So this group of students are actually studying and would like to highlight the importance of prioritizing freshwater protected areas. I'm pretty sure most of you here are more familiar with marine protected areas, or MPAs. So their goal now here is to highlight, based on different biological indicators, biodiversity indices that they are, of course, to be computing, and other parts of the research that I have shown here earlier based on the different expertise of the faculty members. We hope to highlight the critical role of freshwater protected areas. Aside from that, we hope to highlight as well the importance of engagement between local communities, specifically indigenous people. Or for this example, we're happy to engage and include in our research the insights of Bukkalot. They are the IPs in Nueva Vizcaya. The students here on the pictures, you'll be able to see that they're taking informations on the knowledge, attitude, perceptions of this IP representatives regarding biodiversity, and how they benefit, or perhaps how they see other representatives of biodiversity, flora and fauna, that can be threat to their group. So it's very interesting to know their insights about that. Lastly, I hope to highlight extension services. So from our perspective, from research and teaching, we do not want to limit ourselves in terms of teaching biodiversity within the corners of the classroom, within our expertise, within our group, but we hope to bring this to the community. And bringing this to the community doesn't mean sharing of our information or results. We hope that they'll benefit from it and they'll be able to use it. So I just want to highlight two activities that we had. One is we call it Cheers 2022, or Caring for Our Common Home, through an environmental expedition integrating the role of service learning. So here we, similar to Dr. Freitag's service learning approach, that we make sure we take the opportunity. If we go on field work, there's a component where they'll be able to interact with the local community, be able to learn from them and share equally what the community may need, or at least address community needs, specifically for that particular community. So this is just them sampling aquatic ecosystems. This is in Nagcarlan. It will be training, or at least near Lake Yambo. As you have seen, this is Dean Papa mentoring students on the importance of bio monitoring. And we have collected aquatic samples, of course, mainly zooplankton and other benthic macroinvertebrates, to allow the students explore other uncharismatic organisms compared to different vertebrates. But of course, equally important in our ecosystems. Aside from this, we share to local communities our intentions, what we found out, and then we hope to also hear from them the identified community needs, and hopefully from that engagement or close group, focus group discussion, we'll be able to identify interventions. So one of which was identified to help them in improving their mangrove rehabilitation projects. So it's fascinating that the local communities are aware of the benefits of being able to protect and protect their mangrove areas. So we, of course, agreed to help them in terms of intervention, support for propagules, etc. And with the manpower that we have, you've seen how many students we have, we were able to allow the students to mangrove assessment, planting, and even nurturing for those affected, or mangroves that have been affected. Of course, we did consult some mangrove experts how we can further help them in terms of appropriate propagules to use, and the like. And then aside from that, we of course look at different biodiversity in the area aside from in mangrove ecosystems. Lastly, for the extension services that we did, I think last month, there's Lakbay Aral, Sierra Madre, wherein we invited students and other local communities living in Sierra Madre to have a quick or a short laboratory course or activity wherein they'll be able to use the technology that we have or equipment that we have in the university, and then be able to learn why it is important to protect ecosystems and, of course, protecting biodiversity. And we created or simulated two aquariums that would reflect the conditions of a watershed, if it's degraded or not. So Sierra, of course, the name for Sierra Madre, while Sira for foreigners here, it means something that is degraded, at least short term for degraded, or Sira. So these are some pictures of the students enjoying water quality measurements, and then they're trying to observe the physical and biological components in terms of the difference between the two setups. So I think we've covered the three major parts or considerations when teaching biodiversity, but we have to highlight that there's a need for us to further publicize this. Aside from the community that we have engaged, aside from the students that we have engaged, the general public needs to, of course, access information about this. Aside from publication, we're now capitalizing on local social media pages that we have and we're handling from the department social media page, DBS, and then another page is UST Wild. I'm pretty sure there's Ateneo Wild, UP Wild, etc. It's just to highlight what we have in our campus, and then for some researches that we hope to promote in that page. Hopefully, one student or one very curious person will be able to appreciate and remember one information about biodiversity. The same goes with UST Agos. This is recently open page or established page for aquatic fields of scientists, where most of us, of course, are here. And we have also started our Instagram. And if it's fine, no? This is also a shameless plug. You may like and share our page.
Best practices and challenges they experience in their own context. Thus, we now open the floor for actual conversation.
Recording in progress. Difference between those given huge budgets for their universities. So most of them have not does not have this robust infrastructure as well equipment that would allow them to expose their respective students. And at the same time, students from far-flung areas, particularly those from the grade schools, don't have this uh, better educators because again they are not exposed during their academics. Budgets could somehow create or start these initiatives so that their students could also be informed about the present conditions of our imperiled biodiversity. I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Sir, could you please introduce yourself so that, and for the other people who are going to speak, please introduce yourself.
I'm Renan. I am a researcher from the University of Santo Tomas and UP Diliman.
Thank you very much, sir. So, would any of our panel members want to comment on what Sir just shared, or maybe somebody from the audience who had a similar experience? Okay, we have two, Sir, please, and then Sir, please go ahead. After Sir.
Okay, I'm not a professor, but to set my credibility, I'm an MS Wildlife Studies graduate student from Los Baños. So I would just like to, someone who would like to be an expert in the field of wildlife sciences. It's very disappointing that biodiversity is not highlighted in the Philippines, despite being the center of biodiversity. I think the discussion of our shares here are very significant. However, there's a higher level of science. I would like to just share, or maybe go back when we were grade school, when we were asked about what animal do you think that starts with letter T? I have nothing against UST now, but it's tigers. But we don't talk about the trogons. We don't talk about the when we say letter B, we talk about bears. We don't talk about the binturongs. I think that's one thing that's been lacking in the Philippines our foreign participants. That's one thing that's been lacking in the Philippines. In grade school, in high school, we are not taught of what is inside our country, what we pride ourselves of. So one thing I would like to share, I would like to just follow up what my fellow colleague from UP has said. There are efforts. Like for example, in May 2021, the Biodiversity Conservation Society of the Philippines, in partnership with the Department of Education Disaster Risk Reduction Management Service, launched a if I'm not mistaken, the Samot Saring Buhay. It's a Philippine biodiversity toolkit for teachers, where where we the objective is to teach our grade schools, our high school students about the native and endemic species of our country. I think mapping the animals around us, um, computing for species abundance and diversity is very, very important. However, what's the use of this technical knowledge if the appreciation of a certain species is lacking? What if we have certain species who are already in the brink of extinction, and yet we are still focused on the highly technical part of conserving things? No, like for example, when we go to the websites of the NGOs and foundations who would like to save a certain species, I have nothing against them. Actually, they are great help. Like for example, in the WWF, we won't see anything asking for donation for bats, asking for donation for frogs, asking donation for what non-charismatic species do you think of. I think that's what's lacking, and it's a challenge not just for professors, but also for our teachers who are working in the field of primary and secondary education. And for us in the field of science, um, it's not just about going into the field. We should also consider our privilege, that we can go to the field. Not all parts of this country, especially the Philippines developing country, we can assume that we can bring them to areas where there are fauna and flora. Um, Not everyone has the logistical and financial capacity to go on field. There are instances, as much as we want to, there are instances that we are just confined in the four walls of our classroom. So that's that's the challenge that I think I want to share with all of you, because it's very disappointing that we are, uh, I don't know, it's a personal point, it's a point perspective na we are so into the highly technical aspect of conserving biodiversity. When what are we going to study when these animals are gone? No, we should also, I mean, yeah, kasi I specialize on bats, and there are so many people who don't like them. No, so yeah, I'm so disappointed when it comes to that. So yun lang naman, that's what I want to share. And I think maganda if you can search for the Samot Saring Buhay, the Philippine Biodiversity Toolkit for Teachers. It will be a really great help for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think that kind of sharing opens up a lot more questions and a lot more avenues that everybody can chime into. But before that, there was a person who was raising their hand earlier. Yes, thank you very much, sir. Please approach the mic. Or here. Yeah.
Hi, hello. I'm Dino from the University of Santo Tomas, and I actually, I have something to contribute based on what our colleague here from UPLB mentioned, because I do teach at the senior high school level, and the really sad thing is that biodiversity is not even part of the curriculum. Um, I teach STEM students, and there is not one bit about biodiversity in the curriculum of STEM students. There are some mentions of it on other strands, just part of their Earth and Life Sciences course. But again, so that's the main problem. And even if they did develop the toolkit, the problem is, are the teachers really willing to use the toolkit to teach biodiversity to everyone else. Okay, it's good that we have the people who shared, Dr. Freitag, Dr. Rio, and Mr. Peralta mentioned their activities are all good for at the tertiary level. But I was going to ask this a while ago. How young should we start introducing biodiversity? So should we? I saw in the pictures shown by Darren that there were small kids, the primary education kids are on the museum on the field trip. But in the Philippines, field trips sa National Museum is just punta ka lang doon, naging sa Polarium, and then tapos na, di ba? So that's it. So it's not even integrated into the curriculum, the activities. So I wonder if that, or I don't know. JD from the museum, maybe JD has something to say.
Yes, ma'am. Please approach the. Yes, ma'am. Please approach the mic.
Hi guys, so I'm JD. I work in the museum, the botany division. So just some thoughts, no? Yeah, it's a different context because most of you are educators in universities and all. I also been an instructor before. As the museum is also mandated also to educate. So that's one thing. But yeah, I agree with Sir Dino. Before, that's the thing. But it's actually good now that we have the Natural History Museum, which was recently established last 2018, wherein it's a big lift on actually pursuing further biodiversity interest to kids and uh, audience of all ages actually. But also there are several challenges I guess that I could share in the museum context. Number one is that I agree just to second what Nina said. Yeah, science is actually not mainstream. I think that's the word that we supposed to be having. Yeah, it's not part of the curriculum and at times into the family level alone, we're not into science. Di ba? Ewan ko kung if you've grown to a typical Filipino family that you need to pursue being a doctor or engineer and pilots to get more money, yun. So I think that's the one culture that we supposed to be changing dun sa in the basic family level. That's one. It's not mainstream. Pangalawa, yes, teachers we see are not so confident. I don't think the word is they're not capable, but they're not really confident in sharing what they supposed to be sharing to people. So what are the practices that we're doing in the museums? There are actually several because we intend not only to a certain level of students. One thing in our division, I would like to have as all audience levels as possible. We cater to kids, we cater to high school students, senior high teachers. So, yon, we're very glad we have the museum now. Parang if you don't have the visual aids that you have in the classroom, just go to the museum. Everything's there. Perhaps baka may maghanap sa inyo ng mga species nyo. Most are there in terms of biodiversity. Yes, plankton is there, yeah. Yeah. One more thing, in the museum kasi, it's in a different level of interpretation when you deal with audiences. It's when you call it science communication, in the museum context, we call it interpretive writing. It's how you write so that general audiences will appreciate it more. General means at least grade 5 level up. Yun. So yeah, there's what we really call as interpretive writing. I have been trained to do quite a bit of that for the museum context. So every text that you're going to see, it's not supposed to be technical. It's very difficult to be a technical writer and an interpretive writer. It's a two different set of things. You're going to reject everything that your instructor interpretive writing will tell you. There's supposed to be no scientific names. It's supposed to be not putting all measurements, but rather compare them or have an analogy into something that's more that people are more more aware of or like yeah, ganun. So yun, teachers, I guess, and you as people supposed to actually be what do you call this? Be mahirap i-layman na isip. As much as possible, we tend to lower the level on how we explain things, not only to your students, but to everyone in the household. I guess start talking about them at the early age, where we're talking about babies earlier. So, sabi namin, if in the alphabet when you say A, say what? Up to the up to moon. If you say C, what like kite reads? Anyway, not really on that level, but just an overview that there are also things other than tigers and all no, that they're supposed to be seeing. So, yun. If you're interested in some things like interpretive writing and how you communicate science, you can, well, talk to me or I can share some literatures with you para you can use that whenever you're teaching at a certain level or age. Yeah. And there are also powerful tools just to share it in MS Word and yeah, I think in MS Word that could actually check your narratives, whether it's applicable to the age level that you're teaching. So we can start with that. So yun lang. I hope you get something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much, everyone. We're having a lot of input coming from people coming from of different sectors, which makes our conversation richer. And we now have someone from our online audience who wants to share something. Sir, please go ahead. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi there. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I think the host had to unmute me. Hi, I'm Benjamin. Just want to know if you can hear me all right?
Yes, sir, we can hear you clearly. It's great.
Great. Hi, good afternoon. I'm actually calling from the morning. I'm a Malaysian ecologist geographer based in Scotland, so it's early in the morning for me. I was just hoping that the connection is working all right. No, I just wanted to thank the speakers, Prof. Freitag, Darren, and Alfredson for sharing. I just wanted to ask a question, I think. So my research is mainly on social ecological asymmetries and inequalities. I really appreciate what Prof. Freitag said about not succumbing to the pressures of mainstream research, because a lot of this is happening. I don't know if any of you here are from Malaysia or familiar with the academic situation in Malaysia, but there's a lot of this wanting to use the more mainstream metrics to measure research excellence, for instance. So the drive to compete academically with other countries, especially the developing world, in the developed world, is very strong. I guess the challenge that I'm trying to think of here is, on the one hand, we have a lot of the world's biodiversity in what is more or less considered to be the developing economies or the developing world, many of which are former colonies of the West. And the legacy of colonialism means that a lot of times it is the global North, Western or developed countries that have a head start in the accumulation of knowledge and assets for biodiversity research and education. I mean, for example, well-established natural history collections, museums, facilities, and so on. Meanwhile, let's say in Southeast Asia, if we consider, say, Darren's Singapore or better off countries in that sense, economically speaking, it's relatively easier to procure and hang a dinosaur skeleton in a hall when you don't have, say, poverty, rural economy, natural disasters, and so on to deal with. And so I'm just wondering how, or if you have any thoughts on how we can more realistically kind of stand shoulder to shoulder. I won't even say compete, but in this unfair world, economically speaking, and when we consider the legacy of history, whether you have any thoughts on that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ong. Can we have a member of our panel please respond to what he said? Maybe our audience also wants to respond too.
Hi, Benjamin. So I assume that question is for me. Okay, so first, before anything, I just need to, I guess I need to make it clear. The dinosaur fossils in our collection were all purchased based on donations it was a big fundraising campaign and all that. None of it is supported by the government. So the government didn't buy the specimens. The government didn't buy the specimens and then put them in the museum. So it's about fundraising. So that's the first thing. So other than that, actually, in terms of inequality, I mean, we try our best, right? Because I think a number of us, a number of the museums here, Philippine National Museum, the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum, we essentially have collections dating back for a number of years. So these are, I think these are actually quite important collections locally, scientifically. What's the next best thing? I mean, the stuff was already collected by other countries a very long time ago. We can't go there and just demand it back. But what we do actually is we work together with our colleagues in these other museums, and we try to share that information and we try to get it available to as many people as possible. So one recent project that at least the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum has started with some partner museums in other countries is to digitize as much of this information as possible and put it online eventually to be available, not just to scientists but to everybody. Okay, so I think I'll just stop there. Let's take over. I hope that answers your comment. Addresses the comment.
Hi, Sir Ong, was that something which addressed what you were asking? Yeah, or do you have a follow-up?
No, yeah. Thanks, Darren, for taking a start on responding. I think my question wasn't specifically on I think the dinosaur skeleton or whale skeletons or anything like that, but I think a more general reflection on how can say I don't know I know it's a very generalized word in this sense, but how would say quote unquote economically less developed or poorer countries, many of these which are former colonies, catch up with the richer countries in that sense. And I know these are very general terms I'm using, but it's sometimes simple things like it's harder to pay the fees to attend a conference. And a lot of times in developing countries, we rely on bursaries or sponsorships or even donations, as you said, to be able to just show up in a place that is the so-called home ground, that home advantage of European countries that have accumulated these resources over decades, if not centuries. And as you rightly pointed out, the Lee Kong Museum, I mean, there's a long history there of natural history activity dating to the times of the British occupation and collections. And yeah, and of course you're right to say sharing it is the best thing we can do because the collections are already there. But I'm not talking specifically about I think the museums in Singapore, but also I think across the world where there is this great asymmetry, if we can call it that way. And I don't know, maybe Prof. Freitag, I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts. I'm not sure how long you've been working in Southeast Asia versus other parts of the world, but yeah, if you or anyone, even in the audience, might have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, so it's Hendrik, would you like to give some thought? Yeah.
I also noticed there are certain cultural differences also in the perception of nature, but I'm not sure if this is not very subjective because I have another age than our current students. Yet also politically another background when I grew up. But I found it very astonishing that we had students, they have never been in a forest before. This is something I could not understand. Like, it's possible, but the parents would never go out in a place where like a more untouched natural vegetation grows or where rivers And yeah, I remember just things like they also told me, thanks so much that you have brought us here. You are not allowed to go to such places. Yeah, okay. Field trip.
So, first of all, congratulations to the organizing committee for successfully conducting this event. It is indeed no better time to highlight the importance of biodiversity and its conservation. More so if include this in formal teaching. I would like to commend USD for mentioning the indigenous people and their role in protecting biodiversity. If I can just follow up on that, we researchers think that we have all the know-how, and even with the best intention, we are generous in sharing our knowledge to the local community or the indigenous people. But what we are forgetting, these IEPs, the local communities, may not have the scientific know-how in the way we know, but we cannot discount the fact that they have been living in harmony with nature, perhaps since time immemorial. They know flora and fauna more than we do. Their lives are intricately linked with the local biodiversity. It is in this case that we need to tie up with them, tap their indigenous knowledge, protect and conserve their indigenous knowledge, and us, scientists and researchers, enhance that knowledge for the perpetuity of our species, including the ecosystem services they provide. Secondly, I would want to highlight the translation of knowledge for the benefit of the general public. We have all the scientific and technical knowledge, all the scientific names and whatnot. But in order for conservation of biodiversity to be successful, and not only a thing within the scientific elite, we need to humanize science. Let it be translated into something that is easy for everyone to understand for the benefit of mankind.
Thank you very much for reading out that. It was quite long, actually, Dr. Telokat. We encourage our Zoom participants to use the raise hand function because you might actually want to discuss this. And we actually have time for only a few more questions or comments. And somebody was raising their hand earlier. Yes, sir. Please. Thank you very much.
With regards to what, I can't read his name. No, you, Benjamin.
Benjamin Ong, I think.
Benjamin. Yeah. With regards to Benjamin's comment on the other countries having a head start and less developed countries just starting now, I think this is not a race. They've already started, then let them go. We need to focus on what we have right now, and we walk our own pace. We need to develop our own, we need to know more about our own biodiversity. We need to know more of our own endemic species, expand our own collections. And yeah, that's it. So for example, if Singapore is extending help for us, let's take that help. So I don't think this is a race. It's they're leading, so let's go. Then for us, we can walk our own pace. again, we are a developing country, so we don't have that much money. So we can we can run as fast, but we surely can walk forward. So as another thing about translation, as mentioned, is that you can use all the pretty words that you want. You can use all the scientific names. You can use all the common names. But ultimately, it will be up to your audience for them to understand you. So how will your audience understand you if you cannot speak their own, if you can't speak their language? So here I am again advocating for the use of Filipino. So, kung hindi natin, di ba, naiintindihan natin. Pero kung tayo mismo, hindi natin may papaliwanag yun. Sino makakaintindi sa atin? Hindi tayo lang magkakaintindihan. Paano maintindihan ng masa yun? So, it's something that I am still advocating until now, or until good in the future. So, yeah, that's it. That's just something.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, sir, please. You can approach the mic. There we go.
Hello, so my name is JC. I'm Filipino, but I teach in NUS. And I think I can say that I have had the privilege and the experience of teaching both Filipino and Singaporean, as well as other nationalities, tertiary students. One of the things that have been mentioned is mainstreaming and how to make non-charismatic species more palatable, more easy to appreciate. And some of the things that have been brought up in many different occasions already is that we need to start them young. And to start them young, it has to, the onus is actually on parents. And as a parent myself, I also recall my experience as a child when, my dad would take me out on a walk or on a trip and point out things to me. And my dad was an engineer, but somehow that generation was more in touch with nature somehow. So which brings me to the thought of what is it that people are consuming these days? What is grabbing their attention so much? So you have stuff like media, social media, the things that occupy people's minds the most. And I think that's in terms of uh, strategies, right, to be fun and to be able to bridge that gap between teacher and student is to, I think this has already been raised, know your audiences and perhaps from there, each teacher, each parent can come up with their own strategies as well. But I can never underestimate the value of starting young. That's all I want to say.
Very much, sir. And I think that was something that came out in a lot of the sharing. I think many kids haven't really been anywhere, especially specifically. So we have time for maybe the audience. Don't worry, we can always continue over dinner and the break. So you have all the time in the world to approach your panel members, get to know each other, and talk about everything. Yes, sir. So there was someone who's raising their hand. Our last person to share formally.
No, I'm Eric from the University of the Philippines, Visayas. Best practices and challenges. Well, one thing is for sure. Sometimes our students and the general public think we are aliens. We need to humanize ourselves as well, so that our audience, the general public as well, our students, will appreciate what we are doing. Maybe that's one thing that we forget. We always go technical, just like what everybody has said. But we also need to be human in front of our students. I mean, not show them their weaknesses, but I mean, we need to be approachable. We need to be, when we communicate with our students, and the general masses, we should be human. We are not robots. We are not, I mean, we really need to be, how do I say this? Easy and approachable. Because, when you meet someone in public and you tell them that you're a scientist or researcher, only three letters comes in out of their mouth. Wow. And the conversation stops because they think that they can no longer communicate with you. You're smart, Mikal, not really. Or you're out of reach. But I'm not that tall. So I mean to my fellow educators and of course to the scientists in the room, let us all be human. No, be compassionate. I mean, yet it's a general thing. Be compassionate. Understand what really is the need. Because we always keep talking that this data, we need this data from you without understanding really what is really the need of the community for research. Similarly to our students, what is really the need of our students? Why do we need to teach them biodiversity? What do they need to know from us? So I think with that, no, I have our dinner.
All right, thank you very much, sir. But actually, before we do, we have one last comment, I think, from Dr. Darren. Yeah, he wanted to say something. He was motioning.
Sorry. So actually, because one of the comments was, I guess, one or two of the comments was about, we're too technical, too much modeling and all this, right? And basically, it's going down to natural history, right? Natural history, not necessarily biodiversity and ecology. It's natural history, specimen-based stuff. And then how do we reach out? What age do we start? Right? Of course, the younger the better, right? But I think the main thing is this. I think most of the audience here, maybe I'm not sure about online, but most of the audience here are academics. Whether you're student academic, you're academic, professional, or young, whatever. But the academics are the resource people. I think a lot of the natural history, reaching out, biodiversity, learning about native species, etc. Right? A lot of that is actually outside academia. Is driven by personalities. There are people who are very passionate about this kind of thing, and they will reach out, right? So if we happen to be among them, we are among them, and great, right? But if we're not, the least we can do is be resource people, right? So there'll be NGOs, there'll be volunteers, and all that. And in fact, and about reaching out in language, local language, reaching out to the older generation was very important, right? Because the older generation know a lot of things that we don't know, right? Or have better ways of expressing it. And sometimes you just have to trigger it, right? Just say, hey, this is whatever, this is okay, listen, young man, let me tell you. Then he'll tell you everything, and everybody, right? So, I think I just wanted to that aspect of the conversation. We are resource people, right? And then of course we can better translate what we're trying to say. But ultimately,
That they're going to be translatable into something which everybody can appreciate. With that, before we go, we ask Dr. Delocado of the Biodiversity Laboratory to present our certificate of recognition to our sharers. Doc Emma, please.
Hi, good afternoon once again. So, the Philippine Society for Freshwater Sciences, ASEAN University Network on Ecological Education and Culture, AUN-EEC, Ateneo Institute of Sustainability, AAS, Biodiversity Teaching in the Philippine Cambodian German Network, BioPhil, and the Ateneo Biodiversity Research Laboratory award the Certificate of Appreciation to for his contribution as a panelist at the Conversations on Teaching Biodiversity, held concurrently during the third Philippine Symposium on Freshwater Biodiversity and Ecosystems on November 10, 2020, at the Ateneo de Manila University in Valladolid. Signed, Dr. Francis S. Magbanua, PSFS President, and Dr. Maria Asunta C. Guegeng, AUN-EEC Executive Director. On stage, please, Professor Henrik Freitag,
Please take Andy. Say, yeah.
Dr. Darren Yo and Mr. Alfredo Peralta.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff for the sharers. So maybe you guys want to be sharers in the next conferences, right? Okay, thank you once again to our sharers for their generosity. Okay, so before we all go out, can we all have a group photo, please? You can stay in your seats, and we will have a photo taken by our volunteers. For the online participants, we invite you to please turn on your camera and smile. For the on-site participants, please keep that smile hidden behind your mask. Don't take it off, at least for the duration of the photo. Yeah, you can. I think you can. Yeah. Okay. Everyone ready? You have. Okay, everyone, please look at the camera. Smile under that mask. With the mask now. It doesn't fit. It's okay. Okay, so we don't fit in the camera now. Can we ask everybody to move to the middle and move a little bit forward so that we can get all of your beautiful faces? And then for the Zoom, Dr. Delocado will be taking the photograph. So please smile also.
First frame.
Okay, on-site participants, closer please. A lot of space here, in here. Yeah.
Mr.
Okay, thank you very much, participants. Please don't leave yet. We have some last announcement. Dinner is at 6 Panama, so there's some time. Some announcements for our on-site participants. Of course, like we mentioned earlier, you're much free to keep on the conversations going later during dinner, during the free time. I hope you mingle with people who aren't from your group so that you know, to know a lot more. And the dinner is going to be served current social political climate in the Philippines. Senator Bam Aquino, former Congressman Teddy. Tomorrow will be the last day of BSFBE 20. The plenary for tomorrow is going to begin at 8:30 a.m. As this event draws to a close, we would like to invite both our the AUN-EEC is going to issue. You can see the link.